course. I forgot to. You'll hear it in the audio. I'm going to hear it in the comments. I just forgot to turn on the mic and the feed. Great. Yeah, that's lovely. Maybe. It's been a bad
It seems to be going through YouTube and Facebook.
Well, yeah, but it's also going. It was going voiceless. It's now. I forgot to turn the mic on. I'm sorry, folks, on YouTube and Facebook. The audio people will not notice this because they get the. Oh no! Wait a minute. I got to start the. No, I had it started. Okay, good. Yeah, it's so many things to do when I start the feeds to YouTube and Facebook and recording and blah blah blah. It's a one-man band. What can I say? I don't have a crew. Except for my co-hosts, of course, Twyla and Christine. Can't forget about them, can I? No.
Well, we don't do anything technical, though, except I monitor the, chats and stuff like that. But
that helps.
Is there any way we can sort of share?
No, not really.
Yeah,
unfortunately. Anyway, we have with us this evening Alec Sweet, who is co-editor-in-chief of the Claremont Independent at Pomona College. Welcome, Eric. Sorry, Eric. I called you Eric. Alec.
That's all good. Thank you for having me on.
That's great. It's just one of those evenings. Sunday evening. I blame it on the snow. We're getting more of that junk. It's been a terrible winter.
Just about halfway insane by
we're all sick of it up here. It's melting, but it keeps on coming. Anyway, I'm sure in Claremont it's much nicer.
Pretty hot down here, actually.
Yeah, what part of California is Claremont?
So it's like Southern California. We're about an hour out of LA. So.
Oh, okay. Inland?
Yeah, so we're like right next to like Riverside County, Orange County, LA County.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like
it's not far from my old stomping grounds. I was born in Long Beach, but I spent some of my childhood in Whittier, which is not too far from. It's not that far from Anaheim, and it's so I still vote in California. But, so. Now, tell us a bit about Pomona College. What kind of a college is this?
Well, Pomona College, we're liberal arts. Pretty small, pretty exclusive. My class is only about 400 students big, so total about 1,600 students. It's part of the Claremont Consortium. So there's 5 colleges: Harvey, Mudd, Claremont, McKenna, Scripps, Pitzer, and Pomona College. And we're all separate colleges, but we all share like common libraries, common sports teams, stuff like that. So total in the consortium, we probably have around 8,000 students. So it's actually the size of like a mid-tier university when we combine all of them. But Pomona College itself is only about 1,600. It's very exclusive. All of us, Pomona, Claremont, McKenna, Harvey, Mudd, we're all top 10 liberal arts colleges in the United States. Pitzer and Scripps are both top 25 as well. So it's very elite, very strong academic. But we're finding more and more, at least the time that I've been here, that it's in terms of like leftist progressivism, you can't really get much more progressive than these colleges. So I would say that these colleges are probably as progressive as Cal or any other college that you could overlay any college like that, and stories like this have been popping out of. So us at the Independent, we almost never run out of stories and content to write about. So I mean, it keeps us busy.
Yeah. When did you first notice this kind of postmodernist kind of bent and leftist bent? I mean, it's not bad to be left. I mean, I'm left of center. It's just that this progressivism that I hate the term because it's anything but. It's everything else except in name. And when I was going to university, and I know this, I'm really dating myself here. I mean, it was in the 80s, and none of this existed. There was none of this kind of extreme leftist, postmodernist sort of faculties. And when Did you notice it right away when you started attending Pomona?
Yeah, I honestly have to say I kind of did. I knew that Pomona was like postmodernist, kind of leftist coming in. I've heard stories, you know, I didn't think it could be that bad because I've grown up in California my whole life. I've grown up, you know, in California is as left as it really gets in California. Yeah. And it's been fun, you know, like some of my favorite professors have been pretty left-wing, Bernie Sanders supporting guys. And, you know, I get along great with them. So I haven't really had, like, I thought, how bad could it really be, you know? Like, I get along with the left wing pretty well. But then I came here and students, faculty, it's to the point where you're right. It's not even like what the classical like leftism ever is. It's past that now. It's to the point where I took even in like Spanish class or like political philosophy, I was recognizing stuff like this. So like we're just like, what is like the gender, like we're reading like Oedipus and stuff. It's like instead of talking, I mean, I guess you can talk about like gender, sexuality in these, but I think that there's a lot more you can get without focusing on that. That's what I would consider maybe like a minor, reading Plato and Aristotle. So we're reading a lot of these classics, and we're focusing not on, you know, like the political philosophy necessarily, but like specifically like gender, stuff that just, to me, quite frankly, is maybe there, but as a minor part, and we're focusing on it. We're making it the biggest thing. And then I also took the accelerated science. And to be honest, that class, I thought that class was amazing. I had a great professor, went really well. And that's kind of the thing about Pomona is we have amazing professors that don't really get into this, teach the sciences extremely well. But then on the other hand, we have some of these professors that are structuring their class in such a way so that we're assigning projects to decolonization in physics, you know? Like talking about, like, doesn't have anything to do with physics really. It's just like a bias against maybe people of color or bias against women. And okay, that's fine and grand to talk about, but in a physics class, I'm not quite sure if that's the right place. And for example, we also read another article about social justice and stats. And okay, I mean, you can use maybe statistics to look at social justice issues, but if you look at the syllabus, and one of my best friends is in the course, that's not the case. Like on the test, for example, he was telling me, one of the questions was about it had nothing to do with statistics, nothing to do with math. It was purely what can mathematics do to encourage more people of color to like enter the field of study. And if you're in anthropology or sociology or any one of those humanities classes, like, okay, feel free to talk about this. But my friend is taking this class because it's the only intro stats class that the college offers. Every other stats class offered is higher level stats, assuming you have prior knowledge, and it's more specialized. So you have stats like econ stats, political stats, stats with regard to biology. So if you want just a pure intro stats course, assuming you haven't had experience, you have to take this social justice stats course. And my friend is telling me, like, he doesn't understand stats. Like, that's just, he's like, they took a week worth of class time, and instead of talking about stats, they went down to our art museum to learn about, because some African-American art exhibit was going on, and the teacher wanted them to go and see it. And those 3 days of class were wasted. No stats talked about, nothing at all. It was all just humanities related things. And my friend is just frustrated because he's like, this is not what I signed up for. You know, like I couldn't sign up for any other stats class, but I still want to learn stats. So I'm kind of getting screwed here. And so like that's the type of thing that like just kind of like, I think it's worth about the right. That I think that people need to kind of like see and be like, this is like what's going on in these college campuses. You know, like there might be a way to fuse these two topics, but the way they're going about it definitely is not the right way. They're not even teaching the stats. They're simply just trying to throw this postmodernist ideology at students that otherwise wouldn't take their postmodern classes. And it's just another way to try to bring more people, expose more people to this type of thinking.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get my. You said exactly what I said a couple of weeks ago, that it's fine to use statistics to discuss social justice issues as an example, useful example that demonstrates the applications of statistics. But yeah, it sounds a little bit extracurricular in terms of field trips to museum that where no actual mathematics is involved.
Yep.
Yeah, and how I'm just trying to get my head around this. Do you feel that there's a real problem on Pomona, or even in the society at large, which this kind of thing is addressing, or is this just off in left field?
Honestly, I would love to think it's off in left field, and there's some evidence to support this. And I really truly believe, from what I've talked to many of my fellow Pomona classmates, that the support for this type of thinking is not as large on colleges as it's made out to be. I do believe that there's a very loud minority that is pushing this agenda, and a lot of people are just too afraid of maybe social repercussions, getting marked down by teachers, stuff like that. And they're just too afraid to push back against it. But on the other hand, there is a very significant, I would say probably 40% of Pomona, that truly will be true believers in this type of agenda, that is going to push this as hard as they can, will work to suppress anyone that tries to stop them from doing this. And so in that regards, I really do think that it is a problem. And it kind of goes to the thinking of this type of relativist thinking, this postmodern relativism, that there is no truth. As a group of students on our campus said last year, that truth and the Enlightenment are quote-unquote Eurocentric traditions of thought that cannot be applied over time and space to other peoples.
Oh,
basically,
yeah.
That truth and the Enlightenment are things that white people do for white people, and that it discriminates against African Americans or minorities. And that type of thinking to me is absurd. I can't wrap my head around someone that's claiming that truth is, the very notion of truth and thinking about truth, or that objectivity in science, is that regardless of who you are, it applies. And that it shouldn't matter what the scientist is doing the experiment, If you're looking at just something basic like there are atoms. Any scientist that looks under the microscope can find atoms. We can say that the atoms exist, and that's a truth. And yet you would have students here that would say, well, maybe not quite. And that blows my mind, that something just that you think is really objective, that really isn't controversial, can be discredited because the notion of truth or the notion of science is a Eurocentric tradition. I don't know. It just stuff like that, and then the fact that some students truly, a good amount of students truly believe this and are working to push this type of thinking, it does concern me. It really does.
Yeah, I know. There's this postmodernist view that objective truth does not exist, and therefore there's different ways of arriving at conclusions. And I find that to be an anti-science position, that there are different kinds of evidence and they're not all the same value, that they don't have the same veracity, they don't have the same grounding. It's really a means by which they can introduce these other ways of knowing, and I'll put those in scare quotes, and try to undermine science, for instance, and similar kinds of thinking. And experiences to me is just another word for anecdote. And we all know that the plural of anecdote is not data. So I have to remain steadfast in my complete unacceptance of postmodernist thinking. And it's, I mean, how many people do you feel on campus look at this and agree, and how many people look at it and say, what the hell's going on?
I would say that the people that agree and disagree on this campus is probably, maybe disagree will outweigh the agrees by a little bit. But the thing is, the people that agree with this type of thinking are far more active, far more passionate about how they feel. And so they're going to overrun the discourse. They're going to push their ways of thinking. And a lot of the times, too many of the other people that might disagree with this are just going to let that happen. So I would say that in terms of like, are firmly one way or the other, the postmodernists went out because too many of the people that would disagree with them are just simply indifferent to it. And it's worrisome because being indifferent means that you're allowing this, like you said, almost anti-science tradition of trying to simply condense science to what we see and feel versus what we can show through experimentation, through data, through repeated experiments. It's really reducing science to something that isn't science. And they're almost content to let that happen, and it frustrates me. Like when I'm writing these articles, I'm like, okay, like now hopefully students on campus will see this and start to complain, start to be like this isn't acceptable. And yet, time after time, they write these articles, and I quite frankly haven't seen the result, the change on campus that I would hope to see. So it's a little bit disheartening.
Yeah, there's another thing that really quite bothers me about the whole issue, and that is that where an idea comes from seems to matter to these people. Like you were saying, the Enlightenment is Eurocentric, and deal. It's the ideas that matter, not who or where they came from. Why does it matter to these people where the ideas came from? I mean, how do they connect oppression to the Enlightenment, for instance, which makes no sense to me, but how do you think that it is reconciled in their minds that just because something came from white Europeans that it automatically means it's being used to oppress them?
I mean, that's a good question, because, I mean, you hear this term colonization oftentimes, and they'll throw that out there and think it's some sort of trump card, you know, like, okay, so some European countries in the past committed acts that, okay, by today's standards, we would condemn and say that they shouldn't have done. Mm-hmm. That's fair. I mean, we can accept that. But then we can also accept that the ideas and the things good that these countries did, the advancements in science, the advancements in technology, and culture, society, are you don't have to condemn everything because of some transgressions. And you're right. It's that if you have, like at this college, like someone, like a white man, go up and put 2 + 2 = 4. Like people like will think, maybe not, but you know, some minority goes up and puts 2 + 2 = 4. They're like, yeah, of course. And it's just like, but like, it doesn't matter. They're both right. It's just that they'll condemn it because of who it comes from. And it's worrisome because I see this as being a way to, I mean, what they're really doing is they're saying that any sort of science that agrees with their postmodern way of thinking is good, and any science that disagrees with their postmodern thinking is bad. And you know, that's not how science works. Science is something that, okay, like if you disagree with it, you can try to work to show that, like, okay, science has not always been like right. Like we once thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. We once thought that the world was flat. So I mean, there are always progressions to be made in science, but that's still through the scientific process. Through the process of using science. It's not a condemnation of science as a whole. And I feel that they're kind of mistaking the two. So if they want to kind of show that something that we think right now is wrong and that we're trying to use science to back it up, then use the process of science to show us that we're wrong. Don't just say that our feelings are hurt or that we feel that this is bad and then try to shut down any sort of discourse where we try to show that no, in fact, we're right. Use the scientific process to get to your ends if you can. You throw experiments, use the data that you collect, form an argument instead of saying that this sounds wrong to me, or this looks wrong, or this is being presented by the wrong person, and I can't accept this data unless there was at least half the team was some sort of minority of color because of biases. I just don't feel that that's constructive in any way. I feel that we're going, at the rate this is going, it's going to get to the point where we're going to be missing out on actual scientific breakthroughs because we're not letting these talented people in the fields do what they need to be because of maybe some sort of affirmative action, or this person can't possibly do this because they didn't have a certain requirement of diversity quotas, or there weren't enough men, or not enough women, or not enough transgender people on that work team. And so I feel like this is really going to damage science in the long run if we can let this continue to happen, because we're going to be missing out on a lot of amazing discoveries that really talented people can do simply because people are pissed that it's coming from the wrong person.
Yeah. Now, what area of what your degree is working towards? What are you actually personally?
Personally, I'm doing a PPE major, politics, philosophy, and economics, with a minor in mathematics. So I'm getting a little bit of the STEM experience, but my best friend is going to be a neuroscience major. Another best friend is a dual major biochem. So I have a lot of my best friends that can really that are telling me what their experiences are in this field. So I am seeing kind of firsthand what it's like through some of my closest friends.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that the STEM fields would be immune from this creep of postmodernist thinking, but I guess that was premature. And I'm just wondering if you've noticed that in the STEM fields, that are there how many women are students in those areas? But how do you think that the demographics work out to be?
I think that in STEM at Pomona College, I believe that there is probably a majority of men from my personal experiences being in the math classes, being in the science, but I don't think it's a huge disparity. Maybe 55, 45, 60, 40 at most. I really do believe that we are well represented, especially at Pomona College, doing a very good job. There are multiple programs Pomona College has put out there for women in STEM, for minorities in STEM. So there are resources for these demographics that might have been traditionally underrepresented in these fields to succeed. There's tons of funding that the college has put, tons of specific mentors. One thing that does worry me though is I was not able to confirm this as editor-in-chief, but there was talk about, for the intro science, that they have introduced an intro science that is easier, or that the teacher will grade easier for minorities and women. Or international students, that they'll put them in and that they'll kind of lessen the curriculum. And I honestly feel like that's an insult to the people that are put in that class as first years. I feel that it's an insult because it's ironic. They'll try to say oftentimes that that maybe the right or conservatives or people are discriminating against women or think that they're lesser, when in fact they're being babied by the left and not allowed to accomplish their full capability. They're already assuming because you're a minority or a woman that you can't maybe compete on equal ground with men. And I just think that's BS, to be honest. I know women that I've been in classes with that are just outstandingly brilliant. The minorities that are outstandingly brilliant, and they're way smarter than I am in these fields, and they don't need to step up on me I don't need to step up on my classmates. They are going to compete, and they're going to do extremely well against us without any sort of help like that. And so I feel like it's almost, I don't know, I just feel like we baby, or that we assume, that we already almost assume inherent inequality when we make stuff like this.
Yeah, it's the bigotry of lowered expectations, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like that, I mean, it's psychology, you know, if you tell someone that, oh, you've been maybe, you're not going to do as well because you don't have the resources, or you've been traditionally underrepresented, or you're just not as good. Psychology will say that, yeah, you won't do as good. So when the left is, by instituting all these programs that make it seem that these demographics need extended help to compete against quote unquote white men, I feel like that it's almost doing exactly the opposite of what they hope to do. It's in fact just reinforcing this absurd idea that they can't compete by saying that they need this extended help. And from what I've noticed, they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I play football. Our star running back, Sealbury, he's African American, and he's chem major, has done extensive research in chemistry, is already working on projects with PhD students leading them, and he hasn't graduated yet. He's going to be at the top of his field. He's absolutely brilliant individual, and he does football on top of everything else. And for them to look at him and be like, because he's African American, he needs help, or that he can't compete, is insulting. It just really is insulting, and it's insulting to me that that you could take someone with this resume that is just golden and say that that they needed extra help to get there, because he didn't. He's going to go on and be extremely successful in whatever career that he chooses. And so I just feel that it's the bigotry of low expectations. It's really what a lot of these postmodernists fall into. And I don't know, I just feel that we focus way too much on these fields, on the demographics behind it, instead of just simply teaching what the science is, going through, running these experiments, and letting the best rise up. Because in science, it shouldn't matter who's doing it. It should just be a very objective field of science, where the best people will succeed. The best people are going to be making the breakthroughs. Because as soon as you get away from that sort of let the best man win in science, I mean, it gets to the point where these people are going to end up becoming doctors, personal physicians. Do I want a personal physician that got through because they made it easier to get through, or because they're accepting maybe like affirmative action or something, or they feel that for whatever reason that something's too hard and they need to lessen it? I don't want that to happen. I want our doctors, I want our scientists to be the best, the brilliant minds out there. And I feel like that's how it should be. And to claim otherwise is really just going to be a hindrance on science.
Well, I've hogged the conversation. What about my co-host here?
Yeah.
Well, I hear a lot of, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of immigrant children actually rise up in science because they work really hard. So we're seeing that effect. The people that work hard get through.
Here too, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Oh, you're just an oppressive shitlord there, Twyla.
Well, they don't. They might need help getting through to like funding. Like, I can understand if they need help for funding because maybe their parents, it's a single parent home, they're an immigrant, their father died in a war. Maybe they could use some extra funding, but they don't need help academically, that's for sure.
So many universities have really excellent scholarship programs. If you merit that scholarship, I mean, even private universities like University of Chicago have excellent funding opportunities for students in need of financial aid. I'm sure Pomona has something similar.
I found it here in Alberta. It was hard to get. Here in Alberta, to get a scholarship, you also have to be a volunteer. You have to be a community member doing things in community volunteering. But I was working. I had jobs. I didn't have time to volunteer. So I couldn't put anything like that on my scholarship application. I didn't get any scholarships. Oh, I found that discriminatory.
Yeah, well, if you have, like, I know there are programs for adults. What's the term that they use? Mature students. That's the term. As if youngsters at 19 or 20 are immature. But anyway, they do get. There are some programs for them as well.
Yeah, I couldn't find them back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Back then, we didn't have the internet. I asked at the college and stuff.
Yeah, I remember.
It was just hard.
Oh, we did have the internet. You didn't, maybe, but I know it was out there. It was more of a university thing where,
Yeah, whereas I wasn't in university. I was trying to get to college first.
Yeah, so. It can be tough for single parents. And
it's easier now, thank goodness.
Yeah, it is.
The advent of the internet, you can look stuff up yourself instead of going in person, and if the person doesn't give a rat's butt about your story, you can actually find stuff yourself.
My wife just entered university a couple of years ago, and they were very interested in her story. Growing up, she didn't have the opportunity to go to university back then. Now she does.
Maybe things are different now. Maybe I should look into that.
Yeah, they are very different. They're much more sensitive to a variety of students that have special needs, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean that in that your situation is taken into account.
Here at Red Deer College, they didn't have degree granting status even. So what you could do here with what you could get was limited as it is. And now, finally, this year.
Entrance to university should never be on the basis of finances. You should always, it's on the basis of merit. What have you done? What can you do? What is your future prospects?
Should be.
And
but it was all about what have you done for the community? How have you volunteered? It's like, I've got good grades. Doesn't that matter?
It does. Absolutely. And it should have if your financial situation should not be an obstacle to attending a post-secondary institution.
But then when you go to student loans, you change your address. It takes them 3 months to recalculate your new address. It was horrible. In the 90s, trying to go to school, it was horrible. Student loans was terrible. The banks were terrible. I really hope it's better now.
Yeah, we have Pomona College is actually amazing at this. I do have to give them major props. They have what's called need blind admission. So they accept you purely based off of your application to the school. And then once you've been accepted, they'll look at how much money you need to attend the school and give you as much as you need.
Wow.
That's nice.
So we have a very generous scholarship / need program. And so I do think that that's something that these colleges do an absolutely amazing job of making sure that the students that they do accept, the students that deserve to be here are going to be able to come here regardless.
Where is that again?
So this is Pomona College in the Claremont Consortium.
Cool.
Yeah, California. So, beautiful, beautiful state.
California does wonderful things with education. I love you guys.
Well, and of course, in the environmental areas, I know that places like California and Hawaii are very, very strong in terms of leading in environmental issues. California is one of the better states.
If we can go back a bit to these people that are doing these new ways of knowing, they are clear examples of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, I guess
they think they know, therefore they know.
Yeah,
and they think they're smarter than everybody else.
Yeah.
That's those folks People who are absolutely sure of themselves are louder. People who think they know more than everybody else are louder. It's the people that the more you know you don't know. Those people are quieter. But then who takes over? Look how Trump got elected.
Yeah, well, that brings up the issue of identity politics, because that's part of how Donald Trump got elected. You mix in this postmodernism with identity politics, and then you know, if you are white and you're male, you are an oppressive shitlord. They have, without even talking to you and learning anything about you and who you are and what you believe, you're labeled that prima facie just from your immutable characteristics. You know, well,
it's one extreme to the other.
Gender is mutable.
Trump can do no wrong. Yet now, coming into this extreme, Trump could do no right. I wish that's the way it was for him, but
it's unfortunate Trump promotes the stereotype.
Some very good people.
Yeah. We're not very big fans of Trump up here, by the way.
Well, unless you talk to my neighbors who are going to get...
Oh, yeah, Red Deer. I know. Trump. Red Deer is kind of it's Arkansas North. But it's pretty conservative. Let's just put small c and big C.
There's Jason Kenney bumper stickers out. It's like, why?
Yeah, well... Our guest doesn't know about Jason Kenney. So.
He will if he gets elected. Suddenly Alberta will be like in the news. Just the same with Ford.
Think Judge Roy Moore. That's probably a close as I can get to Jason Kenney, who's the leader of the Conservative Party in Alberta here, and Alberta is a conservative province. We're an oil producer. A major oil producer, and
Texas.
Yeah, basically, it's kind of like Texas, isn't it? And weird confluence of factors brought a left-wing government into power, which was
center left.
Yeah. Okay, it's left for Alberta.
It's very left for Alberta, but it's center for everybody else on the planet.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that. Because people think Bernie Sanders is some kind of radical, whereas we think he's normal.
Yeah. Well,
that's true.
As this group, but Albertans would see him as a frickin' communist.
No, not really. Well, I don't think so.
If you talk to Jason Kenney fans, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're extremists.
Because even conservatives were like, Bernie Sanders, right? You know, because people that identify up here as conservatives, often they're fiscal and not social conservatives too, right? Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting off on a tangent here.
Jason Kenney clan together. Somebody who is proposing the social programs that Bernie is, they're freaking right out.
Yeah, we're getting off on a tangent here. So let's get back to the center core topic. And how would you compare Pomona College to, say, Evergreen? And we've heard about Evergreen up here, and it's that was a situation.
Pomona is not, I don't think Pomona is close to like where Evergreen is, thank God. Evergreen was founded as one of those universities that was intended to be very different. I had a professor that graduated from Evergreen, actually, and she just, she'd talk about, I actually really liked her. She was really caring, sweethearted. In my opinion, misguided on many issues, but all she could talk about is like how much better Evergreen was compared to here. Because, like Evergreen didn't even get upgrades, and stuff like this. I don't know.
How does that work? I've listened to Brett Weinstein, and he loved it there, and unfortunately, because he took a stand, and without actually taking a stand, which is kind of weird, but everybody thought he took a stand and ended up outbound. It was a crazy situation, and I don't understand the university. The universities are not standing behind their professors that are. They treat the students as customers more than they treat them as students, and they don't stand behind their own employees, and really a professor's not an employee in the traditional sense. They're people that are supposed to take stands, and they're supposed to be able to justify their stance. But a lot of these students don't care. It's the tail wagging the dog, is what I say. It's the tail wagging the dog when they're students for a reason, because they don't know what they're supposed to learn. That's why they're students. And yet they're the ones that are, because they're loud, that they are driving the car. And they really shouldn't be. They don't have a license. I don't know. These departments seem to get more and more left. I mean, I think Jonathan Haidt talks about there being a tipping point where if a department gets, in terms of its viewpoints, conservative and left, it gets to a certain point, then all of a sudden it just goes all the way over to the one side. And you lose the diversity of opinion, which is so important in discussion, because you end up with a echo chamber of one viewpoint, and it thinks it's right because nobody is there to point out the holes, right? Is that kind of what has been going on in Pomona, you think?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you were just describing, in terms of, especially like in the certain departments where, oftentimes, a new department head or a couple new faculty come in, and then just snowballs from there to the point where, we've had a couple moderates leave. And so
wow.
We have some old guard. I call them old guard because they're more like your traditional, leftists. Versus these postmodern leftists, and they're heading some of the departments, and they're doing their best to try to, I guess, keep this intellectual diversity. But some of the departments definitely were unable to do that and have started to slide all the way down. And I think we're starting to see more and more, because especially at Pomona, a lot of administrators are fully in favor of this kind of transition. And that's a little bit, that's something that I'm worried about, because it seems that we have support from almost on top as well. So a lot of these, the science, and one of the problems is that we have 8 full-time faculty in media studies, anthropology, and sociology. And we have, I think, half of that full-time for something like computer science, and in some of the other STEM courses. And the thing is, we have more computer science majors than those other 3 combined, and less than half the faculty. It's honestly quite nuts. And what I also am finding out from what I'm seeing is that we have a couple amazing, very bright science professors that are, quite frankly, I guess, not being paid enough. And so they're going to end up leaving. And I would put my money down that the people that are replacing them are going to come in and have more postmodernist leftist viewpoints. Mm-hmm. And that we also have at Pomona an extreme problem with administrative bloat. We spend way too much money on administration, not enough on teachers. We spend way too much on projects that are unneeded. We just are building a new art. We already have an existing art museum that's pretty nice. We're building a new multi-million-dollar art museum instead of using those funds for a variety of other things that this campus could really use. And I just feel that the priorities of our administration are misplaced in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, bloat is, I think, a perennial problem at any university. Administrations have to justify their own existence, and of course, then they just make up things, standing committees that don't actually sit and talk about anything, or things like that. I think that's pretty par for the course. And yeah, a long time ago, the ratio of professors to administrators was much higher than it is today, and now it's way the other way. Yeah, we would do better with a more streamlined bureaucracy, but the problem is you got to convince the bureaucracy of that, and that's never going to happen. Otherwise, they know what happens is that they're next on the block potentially, so they don't want that. It's the same thing that's going on here. Now, Christine, you've noticed that there's been a shift here at the University of Calgary, right?
She just put in "be right back."
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask her because we've seen that kind of thing in this I don't want to say social sciences, but the gender studies kinds of things, and where you get a lot of these postmodernists and Marxists that dominate the conversation, and it's a dangerous mix, those two things. I mean, it's not just left; it's actual Marxism. I mean, it just goes hand in hand with the whole identity politics thing. I mean, it's just substitute class for identity politics, and you have Marxism. And these problems. I mean, who is the most oppressed? And there's something to be said for a society is only as good as how it treats its most marginalized people. But sometimes I think that that these people are intervening when nobody's asked them to. I don't know. This is just thoughts, random thoughts here.
Yeah, well, if they don't use evidence to back up their position, then of course, what have they got? They've got an opinion which they're running with.
Well, that's the thing. Opinion is treated as a form of knowledge in postmodernism, right?
It's like, tell me how this group is marginalized. Tell me how. Show me the data.
To be fair, there are marginalized groups.
And if you can show me the data, you can, get to the actual issue and resolve it, not just throw
that would
something
require
at it.
Science, and now you just introduced the enemy of postmodernism,
which they need desperately is
some
lesson in evidence.
I keep saying that skepticism has no need of social justice, but social justice has a great need for skepticism and its toolbox.
The scientific method isn't just for science. I mean,
no, it's not.
Information gathering.
Yeah. It's rigorous.
This method of getting information. I mean, if you're going to say the sun is made out of green cheese just because you felt like it that day, fine, I'll buy in if you'll tell me how that works. And if you can't, then I get to say you're full of crap.
Yeah, and you're going to be treated as an oppressor because you demand evidence. You see, that's how it works. You don't get to demand. Oh, you just have to accept what I say. My assertion is gospel. How dare you question it? But demanding for evidence.
If you're going to spend my money, and these are my tax dollars, show me.
Yeah. Pomona is a private college, or is it a state funded? It's private. Yeah. Yeah, it is your money.
People whose money they're spending should be demanding the evidence. And if they're going to back off and let these people overrun with the Dunning-Kruger effect waste their money, I guess, I guess they can see the consequences.
I hadn't thought of the social justice as a runaway Dunning-Kruger effect. That's kind of an interesting perspective because...
That's how I see it.
Yeah, that actually puts things into perspective. It's an interesting lens to look through. Is Christine back?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you are. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask you on commenting about the University of Calgary and how the areas that gender studies, that kind of thing, or your department, communications, how it has changed over time. Has it gone the same way a bit, or?
I don't think to that extent, but I had. I shouldn't say the light because it sounds so bad. But hey, we're speaking with California. My friend had anonymously wanted to relay his story, right? So it's going on, but maybe it's quite not quite so on the forefront. Mm. And certainly there are people who are like, oh yeah, that's a bunch of bullshit. You know.
Yeah.
Definitely postmodernism is a theory that's been taken up by communications long ago. I think it was kind of originally taken up quite robustly by philosophy, but it was kind of soon rejected after the fact, right? But there are, I guess, other faculties and stuff like that that have taken it up, and now it's become like a how do I want to say it? It's gotten outside of academia to, I guess, a more popular audience, and I think some of the concepts that were progressive and useful have been perpetuated in ways that maybe weren't intended by the people who came up with them initially, right?
This brings up a question. What do you think there is about postmodernism which is attractive to the social justice crowd?
Well, it's a fun theory to think about. You know, like the theories that stem from postmodernism are worthwhile to think about. Like, I was looking at Facebook today, and David had posted something about privilege, and he's, you know, he's so thoughtful and nuanced in his presentation of his argument, of course. But then when it's tossed out there as a way to supposedly refute an argument and shut your, you know, interrogator down without actually having something to present to counter that argument, then it's weaponized, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
As opposed to becoming a useful theory to advance knowledge and to raise more questions and to try to make a better society, it's just shutting down a lot of conversations. It's just been abused, I suppose, in a lot of ways, right?
Well, if you take something and simplify it down to shutting down an entire demographic,
mm-hmm.
No, like what I'm finding, I want to say someday I don't see color, but right now we can't. But
no, but the way to say that is that you want to treat everybody equally and with respect, because
right. But that's what I mean when I say
do want
that.
their identities acknowledged, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I want to see people as people. However, right now, if you say that to a demographic that does get treated differently, then you're actually being rather insensitive. However, if you then turn that around to shut down every white person, if you simplify it down to, okay, white people are all jerks now, that's not what David said at all either.
No,
so
I know, exactly.
We don't need these extremes. We need, I love the way he put it, like you said, nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, for most people, nuance is dead. They see things in a binary thinking mode. They don't understand that if you're not agreeing with them, then you must be one of the oppressors, blah, blah, blah. And this is the big problem with the social justice crowd, is they do not, it's its own cult. Like you bring that up, Chris, and it's very cult-like because it has its own dogma. It has original sin. It has all the markings of a cult. I mean, you know, how it ticks all the boxes. And postmodernism fits in with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess particularly the notion of privilege, it just seems to me that if you're raised properly, that's something you should think about on a daily basis, right? Like the fact that I live here in Canada and, you know, I've had these, you know, I've always got a roof over my head, I'm fed, and you know, there are people elsewhere in Canada and outside of Canada that are, you know, just, I'm so lucky, right?
Yeah.
And this should be just a no-brainer. If your parents, you know, like I remember, you know, oh, finish your, you know, dinner because people are starving in this world, right?
Yeah. Africa.
Like, well, if you didn't get that message as
everybody
a child,
grew up with that one, man. Eat your dinner. This kid's starving.
Well, I actually have experienced, until you actually experience lack of privilege. I've experienced privilege and lack of privilege. Like I've experienced life as a married person. I've experienced life as a single parent. I mean, I see the difference between the way you get treated as a married parent versus a single parent. I get to see the difference of being treated as a married versus a single. I get to see the difference I mean, I've had privileged situations, and it was nice until you experience that lack of privilege, that perspective. It might be tough to understand, but the way David will point it out in a nice, calm voice without pointing fingers at any one group, 100%.
It's a concept, not a weapon to be used against individuals.
Yeah. Or another
and it's
group,
worth thinking about, but it's become kind of this meme almost, right?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times privilege is confused with merit, something that you have earned. And I think that privilege is not anything that you have earned.
No,
if you got something and you didn't earn it, that's privilege. But if you actually earned that, like getting a PhD, that's not privilege.
No, it's not.
That's
Having
merit.
a PhD might show you might have some privilege getting it compared to somebody else.
No, I don't agree with that.
But you can't judge that by those letters. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe you worked harder, maybe you didn't. You can't tell just with those letters behind the name.
Yeah, but there's certainly, I'm sure that me here in Canada, being able to do that is unfathomable for a lot of people elsewhere, right?
Yeah, in Africa.
And I'm totally privileged for the opportunity. Well, even, other people here in Canada.
Well, let's let our guest chime in on this.
Yes.
any thoughts in this, Alec?
Well, yeah, I mean, to kind of go back a little bit, I do agree that social justice it really is almost a fundamentalist religion at its core a little bit.
Today,
you kind of have the two works. I mean, you have the religious dogma of you better not stray from the path that we've determined, but yet then you've also got this such absolute relativism that you can never have anything right. So it's almost, at least like if you're going with, an absolute religion, maybe like Christianity or Islam, you can at least know truth. You're still going to have that kind of fundamentalist think on some aspects of it. But then you're kind of taking the worst parts of both and merging them together. And from what I'm saying is that you can't ever find a truth, but yet we're still going to beat you with a club over what we feel is the moral police. It's really a morality police. It is often how it manifests itself on college campuses. Yeah,
there's a real purity aspect to it. That if you are not morally pure, you are to be, and the worst thing is, you are to receive the greatest punishment. There's no gradation in terms of what is the transgression. It's that you get the worst punishment that we can possibly apply. You hear something like when Matt Damon was talking about the difference between sexual assault and sexual harassment, that there's one is not equal to the other, and then got beaten on the head for it. He's right. To me, that's just obvious. But no, you can't say something like that. So he transgressed and he got whacked down for it. What do you do to this? And we listen too much to the loud voices.
I try not to, but you can't ignore it either. So how do you address it?
I don't know.
I mean, as a first year, I had my room vandalized. So I dared step outside, the dominant orthodoxy being promulgated on campus. And, so I learned my lesson from that. I was stupid. I left my door unlocked. Didn't do things that I should have done. But, the fact of the matter is that a student, instead of, coming and talking to me and trying to figure out why I might think the way I do or why I hold the opinions I do, that they'll just resort to, he can't possibly have any truth to his opinions, or he can't possibly be right, and he needs to be punished and have things in his room, vandalized and destroyed for that. It's a little bit upsetting, because in college I have an expectation that I'm among, academic peers. People are all interested in, learning, interested in gaining knowledge, and yet I oftentimes see efforts to do quite frankly the opposite. It's a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, there's no interest in engaging. It's purely punitive action when somebody sins. It's That's exactly the antithesis of what being at a university is about. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, have we punished this topic enough? We should. It's well, I guess it's still early in California, but yeah. So, if anybody got any questions or comments?
I don't see any comments or anything like that, unfortunately.
Probably scared him away with the reboot. It was a pain. Things are running smoothly now. Much better now that I got everything. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Alec, anything you want to promote on our podcast? The Claremont Independent, of course.
I want to thank you for having me on. I think that, stuff like this is great. This sort of discourse, this sort of conversation. I think that it's important to educate people about how truly our colleges are starting to be affected by this sort of relativist postmodern thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's important that the people that if you see, that's one of the reasons we have such a large followership. The mainstream media doesn't cover this. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, any of those guys, they don't care enough to cover what's going on college campuses. So it's really up to publications like Claremont Independent, other sorts of publications that are willing to step up, write about what's going on on the college campuses, and hopefully try to at least provide some sort of voice, give some sort of voice to the people that maybe don't have, quite frankly, don't want to speak up against this because they're fearful, like I said, being whacked on the head.
Or their room getting vandalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awful.
We've had so many people come up and say, I really I agree with kind of what you're saying. I wish I could write for you guys, but my friends would social ostracization, or my friends would think so poorly of me, or it just, and I don't know, it's really, it's just frustrating, It really is.
It is frustrating. I'm in a very conservative town. I try to talk about scientific topics. I get told to know my audience and shut up because I'm just a shit disturber, even though it could be something as simple as pointing out the difference between a bacteria and a virus. I get it. I don't have the answer here because I'm stuck in it too, and I'm silenced.
Yeah. That just shows that, it isn't limited to either side. On college campuses, it does show itself on the left quite more often.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Graphics of who attends college, but you're right. In the U.S. we have such polar division. I know probably up in Canada you guys are faring maybe a little bit better, but I'm sure, like you guys said, maybe in a conservative kind of part of Canada, there's kind of divisions there. And I really do think the answer is talking to other people. I can disagree with many of the leftists on our campus and still think that they're very intelligent people, still think that they have things that they're right about, still listen and maybe change my mind on something. And then when I'm doing that, I'm also hoping to show and talk to them, and through talking with me, maybe they'll understand maybe something that I'm coming from. And it's just this sort of discourse, it's not being promoted anytime on campus, maybe even uncontroversial speakers, that go against this are being protested against and being shut down.
Yeah.
So, I'm in a couple of classes right now that are absolutely amazing. Professors are doing a great job. So I'm really lucky this semester to have got a really good class load. That's also something I do a lot of research on the professors before I take classes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's always good to
do. Yeah. But, I really just think that this promoting discourse is really the way to go. And hopefully it gets better. The way I see it is that it can't get, for us, it can't get much worse. So might as well weather the storm, keep pushing forward. Hopefully the classes underneath me start to maybe see the light a little bit more.
Well, and I don't understand how an educational institute can, like Randy already brought this up. It's supposed to be the place for ideas, not shutting down ideas. It's supposed to be for throwing them around and batting them around.
Yeah, that's the purpose.
That's what I thought. Now I'm being proven otherwise now, and it's kind of scary because, as I said, if you're not open and willing to learn, and yet you're telling other people to shut up and not listen, like or shut up and listen instead of let's talk.
That is the worst thing. I mean, when that's like waving a red flag in front of a bull to me. Like when you say shut up and listen, I'm like, no. I do the opposite. I mean, you have nothing of interest to tell me if that's the way you work. It's fruit of the poison tree.
Or like asking an atheist, so what did God do to make you so angry?
Yeah.
Huh?
What?
Yeah, I've actually had that question.
What the Easter Bunny did to the Santa Claus. I mean, what?
Well, if you're angry at God, obviously you're still a believer, right? You know.
There is nothing to be angry at.
My favorite is, so you believe in Satan? It's like, what part of disbelief do you not get? Anyway, thank you, Alec, for being on, and it's a topic that I follow pretty closely, and I'll keep an eye on the Claremont Independent to see if any further incidents of interest prop up.
Yeah, come talk about it,
yeah,
please.
If you want, you can have me on again too.
By this is something I wasn't aware of.
And like Alex says, the general public is not aware of this. I mean, one of the few instances was actually a Canadian one, Lindsay Shepherd at York. Or was it York? Yeah, I think it was York. Yeah. Well, thank you, Alec, for being on, and a great guest, and stay safe. Yeah, it's.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Oh.
You've been listening to the Legion of Reason Diversion coming to you from Alberta, Canada. It's doing that again. Great. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to our bi-weekly podcast on iTunes and other podcatchers. Even better, subscribe to our YouTube live sessions where you can join in on the discussion. Thanks for giving us a listen.